Welcome to Bite-Sized L&D, your quick, no-nonsense update on the latest in workplace learning. Today, we're diving into the world of self-organizing teams in IT, uncovering their agile and lean roots, and discovering how companies like Spotify and Netflix leverage autonomy and trust for innovation. All right, let's get straight into it. Welcome to another deep dive on the Bite-Sized L&D podcast, where we break down the trends and transformations reshaping learning in the corporate world. I'm your host, Yakov.
And I'm Donna. Today, we're exploring a topic that has become central to modern software development, yet continues to generate considerable debate: self-organizing teams in IT.
Exactly. We're talking about teams that manage their own work and decision-making with minimal supervision. It's a cornerstone of methodologies, like Agile and DevOps, but there's a lot to unpack here.
Definitely. It's that idea that the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. That's actually straight from the Agile principles, right?
Principle number 11, to be exact, and for good reason. When skilled people collaborate freely, they tend to solve problems more creatively than when solutions are dictated from the top down.
I've seen this firsthand. In Scrum, teams plan and allocate their own work. DevOps extends this by breaking down silos between development and operations in favor of these empowered cross-functional teams.
What I find fascinating is that companies implementing this well see faster release cycles and better quality products. There's that saying in modern cloud companies, code it, ship it, own it, which raises accountability and drives continuous improvement.
But let's be real, not everyone's on board with this approach. What's the pushback like?
Great question. The classic concern is, if everyone is in charge, then no one is in charge. Some organizations are just more comfortable with having a single accountable leader who makes decisions and answers for the team's performance.
I've heard managers worry about consistency too. If each team develops its own processes and tools, you might end up with a patchwork organization where outputs and client interactions vary wildly.
Right. And coordination across multiple teams gets tricky when each one is operating independently. Traditional managers often provide that alignment, so removing that layer introduces challenges in complex projects.
There's also this perception that decision-making will be slower. The idea that teams will endlessly debate important choices, whereas a single manager could just decide and move on.
Interestingly, though, agile experts say that's often a misconception. Well-functioning self-organizing teams usually find efficient ways to make decisions, often by letting the people with the best knowledge take the lead on specific decisions.
And sometimes, having to funnel every decision through a single leader actually creates a bottleneck.
Exactly. Hey, let's take a step back and look at where this idea came from. Self-organizing teams didn't just appear with Agile, right?
Not at all. The concept has deep roots going back to the Toyota production system in the 1950s. Toyota pioneered empowering factory work teams as part of lean production.
That's fascinating. Workers could stop the line for quality issues and collaborate on improvements. Studies in the 1990s found these self-organized manufacturing teams lowered production costs by 20–40% and boosted productivity up to 50%.
But the direct connection to software development really came in 1986 with that Harvard Business Review article, The New Product Development Game, by Takeuchi and Nonaka.
Oh yeah, they studied companies like Honda and Canon and observed that the fastest innovation happened when teams had high autonomy. They compared it to a rugby team playing in a scrum, which later inspired Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber to formulate the Scrum framework.
And by 2001, when the Agile Manifesto was created, self-organizing teams were front and center. From there, we saw lean software development, DevOps around 2009–2010, and now most modern IT methodologies advocate for this approach.
What I love about this history is seeing how ideas evolve across industries. Manufacturing principles influenced software development, which then spread to other areas of business.
Absolutely. So what are the major advantages companies see when they implement self-organizing teams successfully?
First and foremost, higher autonomy, ownership, and engagement. When people have control over how they work, they feel greater investment in the outcomes. It's powerful for attracting and retaining talent.
I've definitely seen that. People want to use their brains, not just follow instructions. And that leads to the second big advantage: innovation and creative problem solving.
Right. When there's no rigid boss overruling ideas, teams can experiment with novel approaches. As one agile team lead put it, letting teams try different approaches creates room for experimentation and refinement.
And contrary to what skeptics might think, decision making is often faster in these teams. Rather than waiting for approvals up the chain, the team decides in real time how to address issues.
Amazon's a great example of this. Their small autonomous teams can greenlight changes without needing broad managerial consensus, which keeps even a massive company surprisingly agile.
There's also improved collaboration and knowledge sharing. Without a single leader assigning tasks, team members must communicate frequently and coordinate with each other.
That continuous communication means issues get caught earlier. Expertise is shared organically, and you build this resilient network of people who collectively understand the system they're building.
And finally, there's increased accountability. In a self-organizing team, there's nowhere to throw problems over the wall. The team succeeds or fails together.
Like in DevOps teams that own a service end-to-end, they feel responsible for its uptime and user satisfaction. They hold each other to high standards.
Makes sense. But these benefits don't just happen automatically when you declare you're self-organizing now. There's a specific organizational culture needed to support this approach, right?
Absolutely. First, you need servant leadership from managers. Instead of directing daily work, they act as facilitators, coaches, and servants to the team, removing impediments and providing resources.
I love that quote from the Lucid Organization blog. Managers should act as team facilitators and servant leaders, helping the team self-organize effectively while stepping back to give team members room to problem solve and make decisions themselves.
Exactly. And underlying all of this is trust. Senior leaders must genuinely trust teams to do the right thing, and teams must trust that leaders will support them and not punish good faith failures.
There's also the need for clear vision and boundaries. Even as teams get autonomy in execution, the organization must provide clarity and purpose.
Right. Management defines the sandbox in which teams can play freely. They might specify that a team owns a certain product component and can make all decisions about that component, but strategic shifts need higher approval.
And open communication is crucial. Problems need to surface quickly, and people should feel safe to speak up about impediments or new ideas.
Amazon has that principle. Have a backbone, disagree and commit. Expecting even junior employees to challenge decisions if they disagree. Respectfully, of course.
That ties directly to the culture of psychological safety. Team members need to feel safe to take risks, admit mistakes, and ask for help. As Patrick Lencioni noted, trust is the foundation of a well-functioning team.
I think that's why we see organizations focusing so much on blameless post-mortems and celebrating problem discovery as much as problem solving.
So with all these requirements, what challenges do companies typically encounter when implementing self-organizing teams?
The transition itself is often painful. People used to clear directives may feel uncertain when suddenly given autonomy. Teams go through those forming storming phases where productivity can temporarily dip.
I've seen that, and finding the right level of management involvement is tricky. Too little guidance, and teams might lack a unifying vision. Too much control, and you smother self-organization.
Mike Cohn points out that if leaders impose too many constraints, self-organization will not occur. The team will just wait for more instructions.
Team dynamics can be challenging too. Strong personalities might dominate discussions, causing quieter members to disengage.
And without intervention, decision-making can become effectively centralized in that dominant person, undermining the benefits of group input.
There's also the question of accountability. In poorly implemented cases, responsibility becomes diffuse. If something goes wrong, team members might point fingers or assume someone else is handling it.
And scaling across many teams introduces consistency challenges. Each team might choose different tools or have conflicting priorities. When work spans multiple teams, who synchronizes it?
That's where companies like Spotify came up with systems like chapters and guilds to maintain standards while preserving team independence.
Speaking of Spotify, let's look at some successful examples of companies implementing self-organizing teams. Their squad model is probably the most well-known, right?
Absolutely. Spotify organized into small, cross functional, autonomous squads responsible for specific feature areas. Each squad contained all the skills needed and had freedom to choose its way of working.
And there was no traditional PM directing day-to-day work. Instead, an agile coach might advise, and a product owner set high-level priorities.
This model allowed Spotify to scale and deploy rapidly during its high growth years. It was so impressive that many companies tried to replicate the Spotify model to boost their own agility.
Amazon's approach with two pizza teams is another great example. Small, tightly focused teams given end-to-end ownership of a service or project.
I love that name. Literally, teams small enough to be fed by two pizzas. What made it work was these teams had their own roadmaps, could deploy independently, and operated like mini startups inside Amazon.
The Prime Now team, for instance, was able to launch its iPhone pilot first, even though Amazon was generally an Android company at the time. They had the authority to make that call.
Netflix is another standout with its famous freedom and responsibility culture. While they do have managers, the core principle is hiring highly driven people and giving them maximum freedom.
Their engineers have significant latitude to choose technologies, launch experiments, and solve problems without a chain of approvals. But the expectation is that they act in the company's best interest.
What's fascinating about Netflix is how they support this with radical transparency, sharing information about company strategy and financials openly so employees have context to make good decisions.
That approach led to innovations like Netflix's chaos engineering practices. The team was trusted to create Chaos Monkey, a tool that randomly breaks parts of their system to test resilience.
These examples show that while implementation varies, the core principles of trust, autonomy, and clear purpose are consistent across successful self-organizing environments.
Exactly. And what I find most compelling is the shift in mindset from viewing organizations as machines with managers turning gears to seeing them as living systems where teams self-regulate and adapt.
That's a powerful way to put it. So if someone's listening and thinking about implementing this approach in their organization, what would your key takeaway be?
I'd say success isn't guaranteed by decree. It requires an enabling culture of trust, visionary yet hands-off leadership, and a willingness to navigate the inevitable challenges. But when those pieces are in place, the results can be remarkable.
And it's really about recognizing the intelligence and motivation of the people doing the work, letting those responsible for delivering have a say in how they do it.
Well put. And that brings us to the end of today's deep dive into self-organizing teams in IT. I hope this has given our listeners some valuable insights on whether and how this approach might work in their own organizations.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Until next time, keep innovating and maybe consider giving your teams a little more autonomy. You might be surprised by what they can achieve.
That's a wrap for today's podcast, where we explored the dynamics of self-organizing teams in IT, rooted in agile and lean methodologies, and how trust, autonomy, and clear purpose lead to success. Stay tuned for more updates.